Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. I got someone's underwear.
Robert Kennedy, thanks for taking a minute. Simple question.
Tucker, it's good to see you. Listen,
you're a Bitcoin maximalist. You're Bitcoin forever.
I hate this central bank digital currency.
Hey, I don't have all the answers, but together, I know we can find them.
All right, everybody. Hey, happy Wednesday, night before Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to y'all. Because I'm in Nashville, I can say y'all. But I'm from Wisconsin. I grew up kind of a country boy, but we didn't say y'all. That's a Southern thing. But happy Thanksgiving, y'all. I will say y'all, which includes like a group of sort of everybody. I'm having a y'all moment. So we're in this massive division. This is a question as much as a statement. We live in the most divided times, right? And I've talked about how we're literally careening toward, well, certainly a political civil war. We're in a cultural civil war. I'd say we're heading toward an all-out, full-scale political civil war, which doesn't just mean this divisiveness. It means like you're really seeing entrenched camps. We're on the cusp of it, going at each other in a sort of a systematic way, and it starts becoming institutional. You're seeing that with the Trump administration, dismantling government, taking down the Department of Education. During the shutdown, furloughing all these federal workers, and then threatening to not bring any of them back. Like, we're going to reduce government, we're going to wipe it out, we're going to cut out all these foreign aid programs. You name it, we're going to kind of undercut the basic, the basis of how our government's run for the last 50, 60 years. And then on the other side, sort of an all-out opposition. That's the beginning of a political civil war. It will start deepening as the divides grow, as more far left and far right candidates take office, start trying to truly alter the system. And then the next step would be a full-scale political civil war where people start threatening to like secede from the union or to no longer recognize the federal government, etc. Yet in the midst of this, Cheney dies, and they have a funeral. And those of you who don't know, Dick Cheney was a lot of things. He's probably in some ways one of the most unique modern day civil servants in the United States. He was a member of Congress from Wyoming. He was chief of staff to Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford, the the abrupt oddball presidency, right? I always like to say Gerald Ford's the only president who was never elected for anything except a House of Representatives seat, right? So Gerald Ford was House of Representatives. He doesn't run as vice president with Richard Nixon. When Spiro Agnew resigns in a scandal, the vice president to Richard Nixon, who was elected, he was elected as vice president. Ford is picked by Nixon to be his vice president. So he's a vice president by appointment. And then Nixon resigns and Ford becomes president. So he never actually won the presidency or the vice presidency. He just got appointed and worked his way up. And then he lost the election to Jimmy Carter. But nonetheless, he was still president for 3.5 years or 3 years. And Dick Cheney was his chief of staff, youngest chief of staff, I think, in White House history. So he's a member of Congress, chief of staff. Then he becomes Secretary of Defense. And then he becomes the vice president with George Bush. It's pretty accomplished. Now, that said, and it was remarkable in terms of his effectiveness inside the government, well respected, but also hated. And many people say he was the shadow president to George Bush, that he really ran things. His deep ties into the military industrial base. He was Secretary of Defense. He was, on the Armed Services Committee. He was a war hawk. He truly was just like, hard to wrap all up what he was. Politically, he was extremely conservative. Politically, socially, the whole thing, he, was against gay marriage and all that stuff. He had a gay daughter, and embraced her and actually worked on his campaign and, considered her wife, sister, like family to him, a daughter. But on the surface of it, was public and openly, along with the Republican Party at the time, sort of anti-gay, not sort of anti-gay. So it's contradictory. But there's one thing, and I lived through it, and I can tell you this. And I knew someone who worked for him. I mean, he'd been a long time in Washington. He was hated. He was absolutely hated by the Democrats, by anyone on the left, by most of the mainstream media. I mean, they essentially, he was compared to Darth Vader a lot. Like he was that guy. He's Darth Vader. Literally, that's what they would call him. That's how horrible he was. Kind of a killing machine, the dark presence, the dark force, the dark knight, getting us into military conflicts, pouring tons of money into private military, like Halliburton type things, and just out to like destroy the world secretly behind the curtain and manipulating the presidency for foreign policy goals. And, not like a Henry Kissinger with Nixon, but literally for the military. He was just a war hawk. And, a lot of people would say responsible for the Iraq war and the whole idea that there were weapons of mass destruction, which there weren't. We just wanted to get into Iraq and get rid of Saddam Hussein. Why I'm bringing him up and why it's an interesting time as we're on the verge of this civil war. He dies. So who's at his funeral? Well, all kinds of right-wing conservatives, right? Yeah. Okay. Rachel Maddow called Cheney the maestro of terror politics. That's a label. The maestro of terror politics. She was not at the funeral. No, actually, she was. What do you know? She was sitting next to who else but the arbiter of truth and science, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Wow. So at Cheney's funeral at the Washington National Cathedral, Rachel Maddow shows up and sits next to Anthony Fauci. Now, why is either one of these two people showing up for the Darth Vader, the maestro of terror politics? Why are either one of them at his funeral? Wait, why is James Carville 2 seats over at his funeral? Why is James Carville, Rachel Maddow, and Anthony Fauci at Dick Cheney's funeral? The deathmonger, the worst Death Star, Darth Vader, maestro of terror politics. What's the guy's name in Harry Potter? The name who cannot be spoken. Him, that guy. Zolar. Voldemort, whatever. He's literally, if you live through it, he was hated by everyone on the left. He was literally accused of essentially like being a traitor to the Constitution, to the United States, and everyone was convinced he was running the Bush administration secretly. I mean, if you thought people were running Joe Biden in the auto pen, no, I mean, George Bush was not, cognitively in decline and having dementia. George Bush was all there. And I'm not saying Cheney ran the presidency, but Cheney was a genius and brilliant. And it certainly is possible that his influence was probably the most influential vice president ever. J.D. Vance may be the next one. J.D. Vance is a different kind of vice president. But Dick Cheney, J.D. Vance to Donald Trump, different. J.D. Vance speaks for himself. He gets given a lot of room and authority to speak and deal on behalf of the United States. Dick Cheney was smarter than George Bush. Dick Cheney was more manipulative, knew it better. George Bush was likable. This is George Bush 2, right? Not George Bush 1, who ran the CIA. And a lot of people think he was just pulling the strings. Why is Rachel Maddow, James Carville, and Dr. Fauci sitting at his funeral? Maddow began her career when Bush and Cheney were in office, and she would compare Cheney to one of the worst monsters in history. Glenn Greenwald posted that because he said, I was on her show when she did it. One of the worst monsters in history. Why is he rehabilitated? Who rehabilitated him? Did he change? Did he stop becoming the monster? Did he go back on his ways and say, I was wrong about everything? I was wrong about Iraq. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have run these so-called terror campaigns. I shouldn't have fought for waterboarding and Guantanamo Bay, being like, you get them offshore, do what we got to do. Who cares? Extrajudicial this and that. No. What did he change? He opposed Trump. That's all he did. He opposed Trump. When Trump ran, Cheney opposed him. That's it. And he got behind his daughter, Liz Cheney, who was also a monster in her dad's shoes until she opposed Trump. And so Rachel Maddow was asked, and she said after the funeral, he changed the country in ways that I almost 100% disagree with. Okay. He changed the country in ways I almost 100% disagree with. So just in my Rob math, I would say that means he did really bad things. Now he changed the country in a lot of ways I didn't like, or in some ways I did like, but most I didn't. 100% of what he did was bad. But she admired that he rallied behind Liz Cheney when she took on Trump. That's in the Washington Post. Those quotes. Okay. The guy literally did everything wrong. You thought he was a monster of terror, like the Death Star master, one of the worst monsters in history. Did everything bad for America, but he got behind his daughter when she opposed Donald Trump, and therefore that rehabilitates him, and I went to his funeral. I think it was a really heroic stand. It's humbling to me, she said. Wow. So all you got to do, you can literally be, they thought Cheney was like Hitler, right? They didn't call him that. Some people probably did, but that's essentially what they were saying. Like, that's the word you use for people who are on the right, who are, not what you like and are pro-military and like massive central government control, not like socialist central government, like massive authoritarian type control. I'm not saying they are authoritarians. I'm saying that's the depiction of them. That they, Cheney was like that. Cheney was like a Trump, like hated by the left and by the mainstream media. Now Rachel Maddow, who called him one of the worst monsters in history. And I can think of some really big monsters. And I'm not just saying, and I don't even need to just have Hitler. I can, even, more recently, Pol Pot, like, Vietnam, Mao, like the millions of people, Stalin that they killed, the millions and millions and millions and millions. And yes, Hitler. Cheney's right up there. But his stand backing his daughter when she opposed Trump, that was heroic. So now you're a hero if you oppose Trump. This is why we are heading for a civil war. And this is also how dysfunctional we've become. If you oppose Donald Trump and you are on the left, you're heroic and fighting the good fight. If you oppose Trump, and no matter how far off you were on the right, no matter how destructive the left thought you were, if you oppose Trump, you're now a hero. You don't have to take back anything you did. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to say you were wrong. You can say, I do it all again, but you oppose Trump, you're a hero. Let's build you a statue. Rachel Maddow should get out there and build a statue, keep it on her desk, on her show for Dick Cheney, a heroic. Put him up there with George Washington or Martin Luther King or Mandami, and like have bobbleheads for them all, and pat Dick Cheney on the head and be like, my hero. You destroyed the country and everything you did, but you opposed Donald Trump. You're my fucking hero. Good God. I mean, it's not only pathetic, it's so intellectually disingenuous, but she believes it. That's the scary part. She's not doing this for political gain or making money. She actually thinks for him opposing Trump, it's heroic. There's a reason they call it Trump derangement syndrome, but that's how far we've gone. I swear to God, if Donald Trump came up with a cure for cancer, and people always say people would oppose it, but I'm going to go farther. If he said I have a cure for cancer, people would say cancer is good. We should have cancer. They wouldn't just say, well, his cure is bad. They'd be like, we don't want to cure cancer. No, I mean, actually, it's not, it's like all the fat people who said being fat is good. Being fat is good. No, we don't want to be skinny. We don't want to be skinny till they got Ozempic. And then they're like, oh, wait, we all want to be skinny. What happened to you like being fat? What happened? There was no body shame. What happened? You liked your body the way it was. If you liked it, why didn't you keep it? Oh, because you couldn't do the exercise, or you couldn't cut down the food, or you didn't have the discipline, or maybe your body, the way your body ran just made that really hard, and your body couldn't, even though you tried. Somewhere in between, those who tried really hard and those who didn't try at all love being fat. And yes, fat, because that's what they were. They were fat. Lizzo was fat, not just big, not just plus size. She was fat. But you know what? What happened to Megan? What happened to Megan McTrain? Megan. Wow, I'm just butchering their names. I'm all about the butt, all about the booty, all about being big. I'm a big train, and I'm a good train. Oh, now she's all proud of how she's thin, and she's not like rail thin or anything. She lost a ton of weight, right? Lizzo, they all dropped the weight. Wait, you loved being fat. Fat was good. How dare you call me fat? In fact, my body positivity, my body is just as beautiful just the way it is. Great. Why would you change it then? I mean, look, I'm in great shape and I'm older, right? So if you told me I could be fat, would I change it? Great. So I'm just going to go eat everything I can and get fat. No, I like looking the way I look. I genuinely do. I don't care how easy it would be. You'd never have to work out again, Rob. You'll just be fat and happy. I wouldn't do it. If you really liked the way you looked, then you wouldn't change it when you could. You just didn't like that you couldn't change it when you tried, or you didn't want to try, or it's too much work. And things like Ozempic, you didn't have to try. And you take having your face look like a skeleton halfway to just drop that weight. So you didn't like being fat. So, this goes back to the politics. If Trump cured cancer, people would be like, well, cancer's not that bad, actually, now that I think about it. Their decisions of what's good or bad are simply based on whether Trump is for it or against it. If Trump gets peace in Israel and the Middle East and the Palestinians and Hamas, which he seems to be doing, by the way, FYI, that peace is holding. It's not perfect, but it's holding. It's actually holding. And some even skeptics are admitting, it hasn't, it's kind of moving. And if he pulls off Ukraine, which we're going to talk about in a second, and what does that mean then? Are people going to say we should have war in the Middle East? I mean, with that one, they can't say we should have war. They'll just say it's not really peace, or he didn't do it right. This is going to be the Ukraine thing. He gave too much to Putin. And there will always be a reason. So we're going to talk about that, right? Oh, by the way, before I leave the maestro of terror, let me also point out that Joe Biden and Jill Biden were there, as was Al Gore. Remember him? Clinton's vice president. And Nancy Pelosi showed up. Nancy Pelosi showed up to the monster of terror, Dick Cheney. I mean, she was like big time congresswoman through his time. She hated him. Adam Schiff showed up. Adam Schiff showed up to Dick Cheney's funeral. Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Kamala Harris, Rachel Maddow, James Carville. What world am I living in? I'm sorry. Did a prominent liberal die? Did Bill Clinton die? Why are they at Dick Cheney's? I guess it would be more accurate to say his vice president, right? So did Al Gore die? No, Al Gore showed up for the funeral. All because he opposed Trump and got behind his daughter, who is just as right-wing as him, but she just opposed Trump. So now they'll put statues up of her. Darth Cheney, that's what they called him. So it's just, it's hard to put together, why why this happens, except it's how much people oppose what Trump does. And this is where I get to the peace talks in Ukraine. So, and again, I will stipulate that Trump says everything is great. Trump says everything he's done is great. And like Biden, he starts making stuff up, right? Prices are down, even when prices aren't down. Some prices are down. Some prices are down lower than when they were with Joe Biden, for sure. But there are also some are still high and some are going up, right? It's cost of living is extraordinary across America. That's why, as I've said, you have 2 Democratic Socialist mayors now in 2 major blue cities, and possibly going to have a third one in Los Angeles. That would be the, New York, Los Angeles, Seattle. All you need is Chicago. But, Trump does brag about his results. That said, first of all, he's right part of the time. Secondly, that's what all politicians do. I don't like it. I wish you'd just admit when things aren't good, but it doesn't work out well. And thirdly, when you're making a peace deal, that's probably the one time you want to make it sound like progress. You want to make clear there's momentum because you want everybody to stay on the train. You can't afford to have, say, this ain't working, unless for political purposes you need to point out someone. So Trump did that both with Ukraine and Putin, kind of going, you don't really want peace. You don't really want peace. Yeah, maybe I'm done with this. But when you think something's happening, you want to keep everyone on the train. So he says we've made tremendous progress ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. And then in parentheses, as if he hasn't said it enough times, a war that capital never started if I were president. He's told us that a lot of times. So yes, I think we know that. It might be true. 25,000 soldiers died last month, he says, and the original peace plan, 28-point, which was drafted by the U.S., has been fine-tuned, and there are only a few remaining points of disagreement. And now people are going to go out, and Rubio and Vance and Secretary of Defense, or War now it's called, Hegseth, and White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. He really puts a lot of trust in her. Along with Steve Witkoff, his envoy, and Secretary of the Army. They're all going to go out and do it. He won't meet with Putin and Zelensky together until the deal's pretty much baked. And then classic how Trump ends it, which is this most bizarre thing that don't know. Thank you for your attention to this very important matter. That's what he always says. He didn't sign this DJT, though. And look, some confirmation, Macron, the French president, said that, France and the EU partners are close to finalizing a support plan to secure peace. In other words, that they can give a backup. And the U.S. is saying Ukraine's agreed to the deal. Of course, Russia, classic, overnight after these things this week, launches a giant, drone missile strike on Kiev. I'm not sure Russia wants peace. I'm not sure at all. But here's the deal, and here's where the peace plan goes, and here's why this is relevant. Ukraine has to surrender all annexed territory, including the territory that Russia doesn't actually have fully taken control of, but is fighting in. So Ukraine has to give up. That's in 2 major parts of Ukraine. And some of that was seized in, like Donetsk and the Crimea, both those areas. Some of it was seized in 2014, but they've made gains during this war, but they've also lost stuff. But wherever they are, they have to cede it there. And Ukraine has to give it up. That's probably 20% of Ukraine. It's a lot. Then Ukraine has to basically demilitarize. They have a limited, they can only have 600,000 troops. And they're also going to lose, by those annexed parts, they're going to lose some of their best opportunities to defend if Russia came in again. Russia would just be able to start there and pour on through. And they absolutely have to commit to never joining NATO, permanent exclusion. Okay. These are all what Russia wants. These do not benefit Ukraine at all. And, Donbass, there's areas in Donbass that's in eastern Ukraine, and there's, they call it the fortress belt. That's where Ukraine can form its toughest protection. They're not fully taken over by Russia. They're not just places Russia annexed like in 2014 and stuff like in Crimea, but Ukraine would have to part with them. And then there's the whole question of I don't want to get it out of time, whether the whole thing, the 28-point plan, actually came from Russia and we just kind of took it and kind of put it out, and that Steve Witkoff is on a recording sort of telling a top Russian official close to Putin to have Putin flatter Trump if you want to get him to do stuff. So, everyone's going, Witkoff wants Russia to get everything. And maybe Trump doesn't even realize that what he's getting is sort of been siphoned through his own person telling Russia, hey, here's how you butter Trump up to get what you want. Hard to say. What is clear, however, and this is the bottom line, what is absolutely certain. Oh, alarm going off. What is absolutely certain is that Ukraine doesn't have a choice. You can hate on Trump. You can say Trump's pro-Putin. I'd say Trump wants peace. For the world, it's a good thing. For Trump, he likes to say he's the guy who did it. He likes to make deals, and he wants to say, I made peace. His ego's huge. That's fine. I don't care if you have an ego stake in it. That's all good. Those who argue that Trump is wrong to ask for this, it's not fair to Ukraine. I go back to going, what's the option? If Ukraine says no, Russia doesn't end the war. So Russia will only end the war on unfair terms. You basically have to cut the number of troops you can have. You can never join NATO, and you have to give us all the land we annexed plus wherever we stand right now, even the stuff we haven't fully won in this war. If you're Ukraine, you're like, well, what do we fight a war for? I mean, what do we lose all these people for? We're just giving you all the stuff you took and the stuff you haven't even fully gotten yet, and cutting our troops so you can get us more easily next time, and promising we'll never join NATO, so that if you did go after us, you're not part of NATO, so you don't trigger us and Europe coming after you with fighter jets and bombs. And I go back to this simple reality. Forget about whether you like Trump or not. Forget about whether he's in Putin's pocket or doing Putin's bidding. Putin is not going to end this war on anything other than those terms. He might not even end it on those terms, except Putin probably does want to end the war as long as he can get all that. But maybe he'll start another one then later. Maybe he will. And at that point, there need to be substantial security guarantees from Europe, and to some extent from us, that if he does, we will consider it, although they're not part of NATO, as if he's attacking the rest of Europe. And we won't let him do it. That's the best we can promise. And Ukraine could go, how do we know you'll back us up on that? You don't. So don't take the deal. It's a shitty deal. Don't take it. Say no. No, we won't give you all the territory you annexed. We won't give you the territory where you stand. We won't lower our troops. And we won't promise never to be in NATO. You know what I can promise you? There won't be a Ukraine. So you won't have to worry about troops. You won't have to worry about the land you already got lost, because Russia will have the rest of it. There'll be no Ukraine as you know it. You won't have to worry about the troops because there'll be Russian troops. And you won't have to worry about never joining NATO because you won't be Ukraine anymore. Or you won't be Ukraine that we want to join NATO. You'll be Russia. That's the outcome of this. There is no other outcome. It's 3 years plus in. There's no other outcome. Russia doesn't lose this war. No, but if we gave them more weapons and more, no. If we brought in troops, if Europe and the US literally went in and fought Russia, sure. But then we have a world war. That ain't happening. So no, there's really no outcome that Russia doesn't win this. Do they lose a lot? Yes. Do they lose a lot of troops? Do they suffer economically? Yes. Does Putin get displaced? No. It's too powerful. And deep in a lot of Russians is a nationalistic desire to build the empire again. So he's not without support for this war. Ukraine, on the other hand, is a different story. They're losing the battle. It's a war of attrition. They're going to keep losing, as will Russia, but Ukraine will lose more. Ukraine will lose all that it has. Zelensky's embedded in corruption controversy, and people are restless and frustrated and don't want this war. And I'm sure a lot of Ukrainians are like, look, I'd rather the war end and we lose 20% of our country than we keep fighting and more of us just keep dying and we're not even sure this is going anywhere, because it's going one way and one way only. Russia wins the war. Russia knows it. Zelensky knows it. They can't win unless we come in literally with troops. Like I said, we're in there fighting with them. We can give them all the weapons we want. They're not going to win. Russia will eventually wear them down. So you can cut your losses now, or you can cut them later when you have even less, when you've given up more, or you can just wait till Russia goes, we're not going to ask you to cut your losses. We're just going to finish the job and take you over. That is the outcome. You don't have to like Trump. You don't have to even care what his motives are. That is the outcome. He knows it. Putin knows it. And Zelensky knows it. Zelensky's thinking about figuring out how to make this deal because he knows that's the outcome. Putin won't settle for any deal less because he knows that's the outcome. We can stop now, and I'll settle for everything I got. That'll be a good deal for me if I'm Putin. Or I'll just keep going. I'll sacrifice the troops and the money and the being, ostracized in the world community, and I'll get Ukraine all to myself. That's what'll happen. Trump knows it too. I think most people who really pay attention to this know it at this point. That is the outcome. And that's why it's the only deal that can get made. The focus on Trump making it, and if he does, they'll say it was an unfair deal. It was an unfair deal to Putin. He gave Ukraine away. Again, the alternative, Russia just takes Ukraine. It takes a few more years. Maybe it's 3 years. Maybe it's 2 years. Maybe it's 5 years. We spend a ton of money, us in Europe, and eventually get tired, which we already are, and Europe is too, of pouring all this money into Ukraine. One, not sure, knowing some of it's being siphoned off by corruption, but two, seeing that it's ultimately just holding. It's not ever moving the line back, really. It's just holding the line and sort of, it's slowing the loss. It's like one step forward, 2 steps back. It's like Ukraine's backing up, but not as much. Russia's advancing more slowly. That's all we're accomplishing. And people are getting tired. And let me tell you why. Because it's not our war. And you can argue, but it should be. And I was all for Ukraine fighting tooth and nail. But after a couple of years, I'm like, you're not winning. You can't win at this point. You need to make a deal. Putin won't stop. He doesn't care. He's already been ostracized. Yeah, we cut him off. If we cut his oil off, it'll hurt him. But it'll hurt the West and India, and China might not do it at all. And if China does it, then we put 100% tariffs on China, and then our economy gets battered. Like at a certain point, it's just a spiral down, and Putin can just kind of just like a cockroach, just keep on crawling forward. He's got supreme power. He's got massive manpower, and he can divert the resources to the military and make everybody suffer. And you can't throw him out of office. You need a coup to do that, and you need a lot more power, and that's not going to happen yet. So that's the outcome. Like it or not. I said this isn't our war, and that's important. Because Americans are getting tired of it, because it's not, in principle, we want to support it, but Americans want to deal with their problems at home. I mean, that's where I would argue the right and left populists kind of have a similar focus on at home. Don't worry about the world's problems so much. Fix New York, fix Seattle, fix Los Angeles, fix Chicago. Fix the so-called Rust Belt. Fix Appalachia. Fix America. That's what people want. That's why you've got Democratic Socialists winning and Donald Trump winning. So the support for this war will dwindle, and Ukraine will be lost. So the reality is Ukraine has to make a deal. And the reality is when that deal gets made, many people will say, Trump gave it all to Putin, and it will only reaffirm that he's in Putin's pocket. And he probably doesn't win a Nobel Peace Prize for that one either. That's what's going to happen. The comparison I will make before I go is, people argue, no, but if you fight like with the tenacity that Ukraine's fought, you can do it. What's an example of that? The American Revolution. I mean, the Patriots fought. They should never have been able to beat. I mean, the world's biggest navy, the world's most powerful empire was England. And the Patriots, the colonists, won. They beat them in a war. There were 2 things that made that different. One, and it was a war in which it was fought because the American colonists, the Patriots, felt like they were being treated unfairly. They wanted to be British. They were British. They weren't trying to get out of being British. They were trying to get Britain to stop screwing them over, stop unfairly taxing them, stop, threatening, in case of the South and the slave trade. They didn't want to lose that. The North didn't want to pay the taxes on things. Felt like they were, they had a standing army in Boston. A standing army is not like what we have. A standing army isn't your army's on standby. A standing army is you put an army in an quote like another country and they just stand there and wait if they need to go into action. The colonists are like, you put a standing army in us, we're British. But finally they had enough and they fought. They fought and they were willing to die. They were willing to do anything to fight. It was their war. They got a little support from the French. It was their war. And they would fight it, and they were ingenious at how to fight it. The British never saw it coming. They were fighting on their home turf, not a turf Britain was comfortable with. And they fought in ways, and they've been prepared. They've been prepared from having to build the colonies. They already had militias. They already knew how. They did the most incredible things, They were so ingenious about it. That's not Ukraine. Ukraine's committed, but Ukraine's fighting has the same tools for the most part. They did a lot with the drones, but Russia has the same tools. Russia knows the territory. It was once part of Russia, essentially. It's not the same when you get down to it. And I'm not sure the appetite the Ukrainian people have to keep fighting. They are fighting because they were invaded. The colonists were fighting because they wanted it to be theirs, and they were pissed at Britain, and they were finally like, enough. They would have made a deal. They would have made the deal with Britain and not had a war. They just were like, enough is enough. That was the difference. And that's how we won. Ukraine doesn't have that. I hate to say this. Ukraine won't win this war unless we get in and fight it with them. That's not happening. It's not happening from Europe. Ukraine doesn't win this war. They lose it. They can lose it all, or they can make a deal now and lose a lot. And we have to honor and get behind them and Europe with security guarantees that make sure Putin doesn't do it again. And worst case, they live to fight another day. I hate to be the arbiter of bad news, but that's what it is. So you want to hate Trump? Hate Trump. I don't care. Anybody else would have to settle for the same deal. Trump's not deciding the deal. Putin's deciding the deal. And if you say, well, Putin shouldn't decide it, fair enough. Then keep fighting. Then keep fighting and watch him just keep taking more and more of Ukraine. I don't like Putin, but that's what he's going to do. And our appetite and Europe's appetite to finance the fighting of that war will get less and less and less. You can already see it happening, not just from conservatives, from liberals too. People more and more like, enough, we want to take care of our needs here. We got big crises here too. We love you guys in Ukraine, but you're not giving us much. I mean, Trump even tried to get the sort of, the rare earth deals, like whatever, that kind of stuff. Like, give us something that I can tell my people, like, I'm getting you something for this. People are tired. And I think the Ukrainians are tired. So is it a bad deal? Probably. It might be the only deal they get. On that note, I'm going to say happy Thanksgiving and leave it with a good note. We did win that war. And the good news is 250 years later, and way before that, 150 years later, Britain was our best ally. And they, you'd never think that war happened. Makes sense. We were part of Britain in the beginning. There were the patriots and the loyalists. The loyalists were those who still supported the king. It's not a shocker, but it's a shocker that we ended up allying with Germany and Japan after World War II, and in the case of Germany, World War I. So life is long, politics is strange, and I think fundamentally God is good, or good is more powerful than evil and more powerful than hate. And a good can come out of this. Wars are all about hatred. The end of wars offer the hope for something better. I'm going to hope for something better. And just going to suggest we all just take that minute. Sounds, cheesy, but to really recognize how lucky we are, and especially lucky we are to be here. I mean, this country has lots of challenges, lots of problems, but we got a lot of opportunities here. We're pretty lucky. I consider myself pretty lucky with, doesn't mean bad stuff doesn't happen. And again, I do think, while war is destructive and hatred, and our society is at war in its own way and it's hateful, I think there is good on the other side of it. I'm just going to say never quit fighting for the good. And no matter what the situation is, can rebirth to something better. It's my Thanksgiving sermon. It's Rob Nelson Live. Thanks for watching and happy Thanksgiving.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. I got someone's underwear.
Robert Kennedy, thanks for taking a minute. Simple question.
Tucker, it's good to see you. Listen,
If you're a Bitcoin maximalist, you're Bitcoin forever.
I hate this central bank digital currency.
Hey, I don't have all the answers, but